Welcome back to Roots and Relevance. We are in the middle of a series called The Stories of Revolution, where we're going through the parables of Jesus. And today we're actually on part 3 of the parable of the Prodigal Son. In the first episode, we talked about the younger brother. Last episode, we talked about the lavishness of the grace bestowed by the Father. So we focused on the Father. And today we're going to focus on what might be, some people would say, the point of the parable, or one of the main points of the parable, is this what looks like addendum of the older brother and how we deal with that. I sent you an article that we talked about last week. There was another one that I think is sort of similar. And last year, actually over the last couple of years, one of the big controversies in our country has been this student loan forgiveness, which, let's be honest, those things can last forever. I know I can attest to this because we're still paying down Robin's student loans from way early on. And people got very, very angry. In fact, there was one article that I sent you guys about a guy by the name of Daniel French.
Seemed like a little crybaby to me.
Did he really?
Yeah, I'll hurt my standing up. I mean, he'd been playing pickleball or something silly like that if he hadn't been working at Petco or whatever he was doing.
He was a military veteran, Jonathan.
I still think he was a crybaby. Sorry.
And he described the push for loan forgiveness as, quote, a bitter pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. And there were social media comments like, so I worked 2 jobs to pay my loans. This is not from him. This is from other people. So I worked 2 jobs to pay my loans, and now others get it handed to them. This sentiment is basically an older brother mindset. Like, I did the right thing and got nothing, while this person broke the rules and gets rewarded. And Daniel French talked about he sacrificed his savings, he delayed his retirement to put his son through college, and then this happened. It's like, well, why did I do all that if somebody's just going to come along and go like this?
We forgot about the surgeries because he said he stood up all those years and had back problems. He had to have surgeries because he was, I don't know, standing a lot.
Exactly. So he went through, he's like, did I go through all that for nothing?
It's a Rule 10 problem to me. Sorry. You know what a Rule 10 is, don't you?
No, I do not. Tell us.
The 10 Commandments. We don't know what the 10th commandment is.
Oh, yeah. Do not covet.
So I would call that a 10 rule.
Well, you call it what you want to, but it's my Rule 10. And so Rule 10 says you just stay in your lane, do what's right to you, and do it. Don't be worried about what the person next to you is doing. It's none of your business because God treats people in their own way, right? Wally, is that a true statement?
Yes.
See, we started on
the last episode. We're going to get like 1 and 2 word answers only from all.
That's a Rule 10. That's a Rule 10 problem to me.
He's going to be like, no opinion. So,
well, I think for me, part of reading this article and having had this conversation with some friends over the since Christmas, because I have student loans, and I entered into those loans wide-eyed, bushy-tailed. I knew what I was stepping into.
Yeah.
And for me to expect forgiveness of those loans is saying that I want you guys to pay my loans. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening at that.
Hasn't the precedent already been set by the former president that said, I'm going to forgive some people's loans?
There's a lot of precedent.
Interesting.
Well, that's where the
right. So
that's where I'm leaning toward.
I can sign that document, understanding that these are going to be my contractual obligations to fulfill. But you know what? There might be something coming along that I don't have to pay these. So maybe there's an option for me where there wasn't before. Now there's an option for me that these things might be forgiven.
But in our covenant with God, we could never fulfill our side. It's called Genesis.
You immediately go to the spiritual.
Genesis 15, isn't it?
Yes.
But that's called bankruptcy as well, right? I mean, you
may not can bankrupt student loan,
right, but you can clean everything else up so you can afford the one thing.
Maybe.
So Danielle, is your point that, like, as Christians, we should not be upset that someone else got their loans forgiven, but there might be wise reasons why we are not for that policy in general? Is that?
It annoys me that people would expect me as a taxpayer to pay their loan. It annoys me that people worked hard to pay their loans, to pay their way through school, and people who went in willy-nilly without an understanding, and people did not take the time to teach them, nor did they learn what they were getting into. I mean, we're allowing 18-year-olds to enter into financial agreements, and it's like, oh, it's okay, you pay it later, kind of thing.
So you would say it's annoying because there's a cost, and that cost is going to you.
I'm paying that cost. I'm part of paying that cost.
Well, I think also if we enter into those agreements that we're going to forgive everybody's loan, everybody, and that's an understanding as we're signing up that we're going to give these loans, and it's going to be for everyone, not just some people. I think the problem is that it's not for everybody. That,
what do you mean? Oh, like it's not benefiting every single person, like people that didn't go to school or saying,
yes,
I'm having to pay.
But also, it's not everybody that has student loans getting them forgiven.
Just the middle class. That's what the article says, middle class.
Primarily the middle class.
But anybody who's carrying a loan.
So is that justice? Is that if you're not treating everybody equally? Is that justice? Is that what we're reacting to?
I don't know.
That it's a bit of injustice?
Is a Calvinist justice?
Calvinist, tell us about that. Like,
is it just for God to love not only some and not all?
So
just say no.
I do find it interesting, and maybe I'm jumping a little bit, but like there is a cost to your point. But even the story kind of shows that, right? The older brother, without like saying that he wanted to, paid some of the cost of the forgiveness of the younger brother, right? Because when he's doing the fattened calf and he's like pulling out all these things, there's no longer any inheritance that is not owned by the older brother and the father. And so when the father throws a party, he's throwing it at the expense of the older brother, which he did not actually give permission for. So he experiences a cost. The older brother experiences a cost.
Well,
is that not the same?
No, it's not the same, because the estate is the father's. So he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, but
do whatever
you're,
he wants.
You're eating into his inheritance. Though.
I have said to my children, I will work to leave you something, but don't expect. You cannot expect. I'm going to work to leave you something, but it's like if I'm doing something with my money, my estate, what I've been entrusted with, talking about stewardship in the kingdom, then what I do with that is my business. And then when I hand it over to you, now it's your business.
So the government is the father in this, in your example now, because we handed over our money for taxes to the government, and it's now there.
Okay, well, it's obviously not a one-to-one.
Well, I think as we look
I'm provoking a little bit intentionally.
As we look at the father, we're going to see.
I thought we just looked at the father last week.
Yeah, but we see the father plays prominent in this part too, right?
Sure.
How is he treating the older brother versus how he's treating the younger brother?
That's what we're going to dig into today. That's a great segue.
That's a segue. Did you hear that?
That was great. Let's
got the
read the
scripture?
scripture.
I generally fall off segues. So
Let's read the scripture, and then we will dig into this and have some good debate/discussion.
Do I get to read?
Please do.
Without my glasses. Now his older son was in the field. As he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he summoned one of the servants, questioning what these things meant. Your brother is here, he told him, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. CSB. Then he became angry and did not want to go in. So his father came out and pleaded with him. But he replied to the father, "Look, I have been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when the son of yours came, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. Son," he said to him, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." When I don't have my readers, I read slowly.
Is that the reason?
I read slowly. I barely could see the next word.
That was not intentional?
It was not. I couldn't read these little bitty words.
I felt like it was for emphasis.
I did too.
The prostitute one was.
Setting it up.
The prostitute thing.
you should not read with your readers then. Thank you.
I knew you were going to say that. I set that up for you, Daniel.
So tell me if I'm wrong on this, but
I can't wait.
I feel, I know you can't. I feel like the older brother actually has a great point here. And so look at verse 29 again. But he answered the father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends."
Does anybody think about Tom Brady every time you read this now?
No.
What? No. What? Why?
He's the goat.
Okay.
Oh,
but,
no. I don't.
but he's
I
not the
don't
only
because it's actually
one.
Peyton Manning.
That's an interesting argument.
Well, he's got a commercial. He's on a goat.
Yes, it's on a.
He's the
sporting
greatest
goods
of all
commercial.
time.
I think it's a bronze goat.
Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Anyway.
I completely interrupted
Thank
you,
you,
Tim.
Riley.
I think an interesting word in verse 29, and I use the ESV translation, and the word there is served, where I think your translation is slave.
Slaving.
Yeah,
Right.
it's actually.
The CSP is probably a little better on that.
I think the actually better understanding of what's happening there, especially in context of what we
The sandals.
Which
right,
one is a
right?
better
there
understanding?
you go. Slaving.
Slaving.
Yep.
See, I listened to you last week.
So, like, my immediate
What?
reaction is this father been a little bit negligent, right? Because, the younger brother gets a party when all he did was rebel and leave and say, Dad, you're dead to me. The father's been slaving, or the older brother's been slaving the entire time. He never got a party. Like, I can see why he'd be upset.
Listen, you
tell me why I'm wrong.
Wally calls Yahweh ridiculous last week, and you just called him negligent this week.
I called the father in the story.
Yahweh
So the father in the story, he's celebrating not because he sinned, but that he returned. So I think that's a distinction to be made.
Fair point.
So now, where's the older brother? I mean, you talk about him slaving. When he finds out all that, where is the older brother? What's he doing?
he's
Outside
in
the
the
party.
field.
He's in the field. And what is he doing in the field? He's been working all day. He's been working all day. And all of a sudden he comes near the house, right? So it's important that there's a celebration going on in the house. It reminds us of the first part of this parable and with the lost sheep. Reminds us of the second part of the silver coin, that there's that house, there's a celebration, there's a party going on, and that and everybody's in there.
So the title should have been The Parable of the Two Lost Sons. Is that?
No, I think it's a parable of the lost son, but there's only one lost son. It's not the one that we think.
Oh.
Well, what I think is
You
interesting
have
is
studied.
the father here, because we're going to talk about the character of the father. The father's reaction to the son is, what's yours is mine. I wasn't withholding anything from you. You have all these things. Not you could have. Have these things.
Where does the conversation with the younger boy and the older boy happen?
Outside the house.
Outside the house. The father leaves the house to go where? To meet his younger boy. While he's still a long way off, the father sees him and he runs to him.
That's another good point, Wally.
It's like he studied.
It's like this is like
And so
ridiculous how much I'm learning today.
And the older boy is outside the house, and what does the father do?
Go outside the house.
He goes to the son. He goes to the older boy.
Well, that's because the boy refused to go to the house.
But he didn't have to go see the older son. He could have just said, well, forget him. Let him out there and sulk.
That's right.
That's what I
All
would have
right.
been insulting.
I'm going to continue to play devil's advocate just to keep
I'll
going
have
a
the
little
answer.
bit
Don't
here.
forget. I'll have the answer at the end, but keep going.
Like, I think a first century listener would have been struck at the fact that the older brother comes in from the house and he's like, what's going on? Like, how odd is it that he doesn't know what's happening
Because he's been working in the field,
to
Tim.
a community-wide party,
Because it just happened.
and he is the last to know? That makes me question, what is this relationship? Is the relationship between the father and the older son so bad that he doesn't even know what's going on in his own house on this giant party that would have been, I mean, everybody would have known about it. It says he heard the music and saw the dancing, and he's like, what is going on?
Well, let's go
'Cause there's
back.
always-
Well,
go ahead.
let's go back to his what the older son says to the father that he's been doing. I've been slaving in the field. In other words, his relationship to the father is not a relational relationship. It's based on what he's been doing for the father. And even if we go back to who Jesus is talking to, who he's telling these parables to, it's the tax collectors and sinners, and it's the Pharisees and Sadducees. The Pharisees would be the ones that were working. They're legalistic. They're not having a relationship with God. They're doing what they think they have to do and not necessarily looking for that relational aspect. And so God has to go and meet them in that place to go, hey, this isn't the celebration. This isn't where you're meant to be. Let me draw you in to salvation and who I am and have an actual relationship with me.
Riley, I need you to do one thing. I need you to just tiptoe gently because you're about to step in on my answer. So
Oh,
just back
sorry.
off.
He's a lawyer, so I guarantee it will be a trap.
Riley will not say anything else because she's tiptoeing into my answer. But go
I'm
ahead,
just
Tim,
good
you were
like
gonna
that.
say-
Well, part of I think to your point, Riley, is the older brother even says, and I obeyed your commands. Right? And so clearly this is Jesus in the parable talking to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, making it very clear that this isn't what's important. In the father's response, and to respond to you quickly, somebody always has to be the last to know. It doesn't necessarily speak to relationship.
My point is, though, in that culture, it would never have been the brother. In fact, the brother actually had a responsibility to reconcile the entire family and to run that party, and yet he was the last to know.
Didn't know that.
Does the older boy ever address his father as father?
No.
Does the older boy?
I'm saying
ever
no.
address his father's
Gold
father?
star.
I don't understand what you're asking.
When the younger boy comes home, what's the first thing he says?
Father.
Father, I have sinned against you. The older boy never acknowledges his dad as father, maybe as taskmaster. He never addresses him as father. In fact, how does he refer to his younger brother?
Your son?
Your son, this son of yours.
Another great point you're making today.
not my younger brother. When my younger brother came home, look what you did for him. He doesn't see himself as a son. He doesn't even see himself as a member of this family.
That's because he's lost.
I don't know that I would.
I'm liking Wally's point here.
Thank you.
And you have studied for this.
You know what's interesting, and I love that. This is not mine. One of the commentators was talking about that phrase and saying he addresses the older brother. To the older brother, he says, "This younger son of yours," and the father's response back to him.
That's right. Listen,
is this brother of yours. He brings it back into context, which we always talk about the idea of, like, we're not in the West. We think intensely personal. We're just thinking about what does it mean for me. The father here is actually trying to reconcile the community, and like the entire community, but also his family, by saying, no, don't say, your son, it's your brother, which again, in that culture, siblings were the primary family relationship, even more than a spousal relationship.
Another good point. Y'all all have studied.
Well, that's why in terms of him saying this son of yours, I see if I'm looking at in parallel with Sadducees, Pharisees, and how they're dealing with sinners, it's like this separation that I'm not a sinner like this person, and I'm equating you with this sinner brother, son of yours, and so it's a way of pushing off like this, but not necessarily saying I'm not part of the family.
I got what he said. Did you understand what he said?
Yeah.
I like that point, Daniel. I agree with you more than I do Wally.
I appreciate the point. I don't agree with it, but I still appreciate the point. Because I think there's as much as we talked about last week about the younger boy as a son wanting to come back as a slave and the father accepting him back as a son. Here we have this older boy that sees himself as a slave. Yeah. There's a reason that he uses, I've been slaving for you.
Which is interesting. He does not even characterize what he's been in as a relationship. He characterizes it as an employer.
That's right. Transactional.
To go back a couple weeks ago.
I do this for you, now you do this for me, right?
Right.
And isn't that how the Pharisees transacted? They didn't have a relationship or personal relationship with God. They had this transactional. I do these things, so God, you're supposed to do these things for me.
And yet Jesus still viewed the Jews as the first, right? They are the eldest. They have the primogeniture in the relationship with the Gentiles. So Jesus in this parable isn't throwing them out. He's making clear this is how you're viewing it, and it's not that way. So to your point, that gives clarity to the point you were making.
That's good. Let me ask you this: is great going back to the transactional idea? Is grace a zero-sum game? In other words, we talked about this earlier, but the older brother feels like that his younger brother's gain is actually coming at his expense, and as Daniel pointed out, it not yet, but you can see how he would think that anything spent on this party is money that I eventually won't get. In other words, he has a view, of the Father or of God that in order for me to win, you have to lose. And if you win, then it's at my it's at my expense.
What's the older boy complaining about that his dad? Hey, Dad, I've done all these things for you. You've never even done what?
Give me a goat.
Giving me a party.
Nothing.
You haven't given me not the fattened calf. You haven't given me a goat, right?
Yeah.
And what's the father's response to his son?
I have this answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could read it. Somebody have
my
that.
readers?
Yeah, no. What did he say back?
Basically, you already have it.
All that is mine is yours.
Yeah, that's what he said. That wasn't what I was remembering.
Okay, what you?
I can't. No, that wasn't what I wanted to say.
Oh, what you want to say? Go ahead.
I'm going to give the answer to this, and I don't want to give it. It's only like 22 minutes deep. I got another 10.
But I really, but see,
It's like a grenade, like a meaning grenade that throws out.
part of the Father's response here is it's twofold. Not only what I have is yours, he says, you are always with me.
The with is key, right?
Yes.
The with.
Can
So
I?
there's no separation here. You're with me.
Which is bigger, I think, than even everything I have is yours. The whole point is the relationship.
Can I give a confession?
Absolutely.
Confess.
Okay.
Let me guess, you didn't
So Sunday nights are kind of sacrosanct for me. Sunday nights are very important. And then recently, I've had a friend that's invited me to another Bible study to have to go to.
So many Bible studies.
His name is Tim Nussbaumer, and so I said no. I told Tim very briefly last week that I would not be attending his Bible study on Sunday nights because I don't want to go. And my wife said we're going to go. I was like, okay. See how the complementarian relationship we have.
It's just that.
I told her I was not going to go. She could go. I don't care. You do what you want to do. And then I showed up 2 Sundays ago, and so we're doing this book. I forgot the name of it already by this guy. I don't really know.
Yeah, exactly.
But his first lesson was about apprenticeship. So he goes through this long, arduous thing about how a Jewish person that was going to school, if you're really smart, then you did your job, then you'd step up a degree and you do another degree. And before you know it, you become an apprentice. So I remember growing up, Wally was sleeping. That would be my brother, Wally, the middle brother. James, my oldest brother, who's dead now, he was sleeping. But me, the duteous younger son, would get up with my father at 6 o'clock. And we would do stuff, which means I would just follow him around and hold things for him. Can you go get that for me? Can you go get that for me? Can you go get that for me? And so I learned in that I could do things, and I never really was taught anything. I just hung out, and the fun part for me was I really didn't have to do anything. I just sat underneath my father. Isn't that good? You already see what I'm saying?
Good, man.
You like this? And so the older son is sitting with his father, but he's not. He's
not learning. He's not taking
because he doesn't want to be with his father because he's worried about slaving away and earning his way. And the younger son doesn't want to be with his father because he'd rather go out and hang out with pigs with the inheritance. But the younger son does come back to say, now this is arguable. I agree with you. I don't know that he wants to be back with the father or not. But we're going to make that. We're going to make that translation here. That he finally gets away from his father and says, I'd rather just be around my father, even as a slave, which is how the older brother is looking at himself, as a slave to his father, but not to sit underneath him, but to work for him. And so I mentioned this last week when I had to go to the second Sunday night, which we went late, by the way, Tim, if we can reel that back in for this anytime Sunday coming, is that sometimes we do things out of duty. And so I made this big thing about it's the trust the process. I said process, by the way. Trust the process. And I'm like, to me, Wally knows me very well, process means I've got to earn something. I'm moving up the check boxes, and eventually I'll get to the end of the process because there's a beginning and end. And I said, I'm doing yoga again. That's right. I am, Wally. And I said, every time you go into a yoga studio and you're going through your poses and your flows, you're not trying to get to the next best step. You're just practicing what you've just done. And you just practice in your thing. So for me, what I'm struggling with now, to be transparent, is to quit trying to achieve and acquire, but just to sit and not try to achieve anything. Just sit. And what I glean and learn, whether that's through prayer, whether that's through Bible study, I'm not trying to impress
anybody. It's not
anybody.
a checklist.
And so as I was talking to my yoga instructor, who's a great person, she said, but it's also about the present moment, which is big yoga stuff. And I said to myself, if I would ever do a podcast, I would call it presence practice.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I feel like there needs to be a little bell now because that was my old podcast was called Presence Practice. Thank you very much.
Well, I think Jonathan said when he was telling the story about he and his dad,
Or it'd be your dad too.
Yeah, my dad. That's son of his.
that dad of his.
The dad of yours.
Notice he said that I work with dad.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't I work for dad.
Did I say that? Did I say it right?
He said with. And so this older boy didn't see something working with my father. I'm working for my father. And if we see this in his response when he says, when this son of yours comes home who has devoured your wealth with
prostitutes,
which we actually don't know.
We don't know that to be true.
How does the question is, how does the older boy know?
He doesn't.
What his younger boy spent his money on?
He doesn't. He has no idea.
Unless it's revealing his heart.
Because that's what he wanted to do.
That's right. If I
another good point.
He's going to make him the worst
if I
person.
Because I don't want to be here.
I want to be wasting my money with prostitutes.
But this is my obligation. This is what I got to do. It's not what I get to do. It's what I got to do. And so I'm gonna. If I had the guts to do what my younger brother did, which I wish I had, but I don't, because I know
I'd spend all money on not on pigs, but on prostitutes.
That's right. I would blow my money on prostitutes, just like my older boy, my younger. Because we're not told in the first part what he spent his money on. It just says
pig farm,
riotous living. Right? It doesn't specify what he spent it on. We don't know what he spent it on, but the older boy says, "I know what I'd spend the money on."
Prostitutes.
So it shows the inclination of his heart. Right? It's not inclined to his father. It's what he can get from his dad.
I also think it's a question. I wonder if the older brother has such anger and animosity towards his younger brother that he takes a three-dimensional person that has like a lot of nuance and flattens him out and makes him a caricature and the enemy. And like, not only did you steal not only did you take your inheritance, not only did you basically tell your dad, I wish you were dead, I'm going to put the worst possible things on you. And I think that's a fair reading because, again, he's talking to the Pharisees as a group here. And that's exactly what they do is like, oh, you're a sinner. And like, you deserve whatever's coming to you because you're all these things. And that's what we do, right? We take a person and we make them an other and we put them in the worst possible light to justify our feelings.
And how does the father respond to his son's
charge?
With grace.
What's the first word he says? Son.
Pure grace.
He never said son to his younger boy. Right? He let his actions speak more. But for his younger boy and his older boy, he says, I'm reminding you of who you are.
Mm.
I'm reminding you're my son. You're not a slave. Just as he let his actions speak for his younger son, he's saying to his older son,
Mufasa.
You're my son. That's right. Yeah. And so,
Lion King reference.
And so we see this compassion that not only he has for his younger son, but we see this compassion that he has for his older son. That's the same. We don't see the father treating the older boy any differently. We see him treating
He pursues them both.
Yes.
Let's take this, and because we have about...
This is really kind of a boring podcast today.
You think so?
You just said way too much truth for me. It's silly.
Well, as we kind of wind down this 3-part series on the Prodigal Son, I think it's important that we get to the so what. And we've talked a lot about this, is that we immediately jump to the individual, like where do I fit in the parable? And that's fine. But this would have been another parable that is directed toward the community and specifically towards groups of people. The Pharisees, I would argue that the biggest point in this is what people look at as the addendum, which is the older brother, because he's talking directly to the Pharisees and exposing what is in their heart. So here's my question is, how does this play out in the North American church today? Like, how are we older brothers in the church? How does that play out? And what does that look like to younger brothers and ultimately to God?
Can I answer?
Please.
Are you going to answer the older brother or the younger brother or both?
I was saying.
No, the older brother.
I thought you only had one question.
Oh.
About
It was
the older
a
brother.
3-parter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I only heard one question with one part.
But you only heard what you wanted
So
to hear.
this is what I believe. I was pretty transparent. I'm kind of confessional in this.
Yes, you are.
I feel like the lights
think
are
you're
on
just
me
a-
and like
just
that.
open
So, I'm
book.
deconstructing or de-churching. I don't know what we call it now. And so I've been out of what we would call formal church for, 18 months almost now. And I've learned a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things. Your eyes kind of open up bigger. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying my eyes are bigger now to see things. And I think one of the biggest things that I have now found appreciation is from what I just told you, what the point of the parable was, and that was you're supposed to laugh. Is that when you
Laugh track.
is that there's always a ulterior motive to me when there's church. Or there were for me there was. I can't speak for everybody else. And that when you just sit and stop and you kind of put everything in your proper context, that you realize that sometimes the Father just wants you to sit. I've told plenty of people over my whole life that one of the worst disciplines I do spiritually is prayer, because I just don't. Am I boring you, Daniel? And just can't.
It's the hour, not the company.
We're doing this at midnight. So I don't pray because I've told you, why don't I pray, Timmy? Have you ever listened to my answer? Why don't I pray?
Because God already knows it all.
God already knows the answer. I'm not Calvinistic, but God already knows everything. So why am I going to bore him with this? And my point is, because it's just like my dad. He could have done it by himself and probably would have plenty of days. But what I would give now that my boy's 8th grade and wants to sit in his room and watch YouTube on his TV or do something on his computer, instead of just walking around with the best guy he could know, like me, and cooking or smoking or not smoking meats.
Smoking meat.
Smoking the marijuana?
Smoking meats. Or doing whatever, and whether he's learning or not, just to be around me would just be really, really cool. And that would be the biggest blessing that he could ever give me, not because he thinks I'm the best, but he could just hang out with me. And I think God a lot of times really doesn't need all our stuff that we're doing, branding.
But we got to get stuff done.
Branding and buildings and all these programs, and we're bringing tracks to people. And we've got this next program, we got this next cantata. I'm sure Jesus loves all that. But ultimately, sometimes I think he just wants to sit with him and just sit as an apprentice at his feet. Like, what are you doing today? Let me see what you're doing today.
Practicing the presence of God?
Like practice presence. Presence practice.
Presence practice.
That was my takeaway. And y'all said so smartly that there's only 2 parables where he actually explains it. To me, I think this is an explanation of the parable in the oldest son portion of it. That he's trying to explain is, I don't treat anybody differently. Whether you see yourself as a son or a slave, or whether you see yourself as a slave or a son, I'm still going to treat you the same because that's who my character is.
So your answer then, as far as how the church is the older brother, is we are caught up in all the things of trying
slaving
to
for Jesus,
slaving for Jesus, of
instead of
doing
sitting
the
with
next
Jesus.
thing instead of sitting with Jesus.
The Martha Mary.
Yeah, we're leveraging in the world through all kinds of things because of Jesus, but that leverage is pulling us away from sitting with him without any ties, without any strings. I don't know if I made sense when I said the leverage part, but
who is the only one not in the house at the party?
Oldest son.
The older brother.
The only brother. So we talk about this as the parable of the prodigal son, of the lost son, right? The only one that is not, and we know from the other 2 parts of this parable that the house is this place of celebration that is resembling what? Heaven, and the celebration.
New Jerusalem.
Right. The celebration that's happening in heaven over these lost that have come and returned home. And so here, the older brothers, our churches are littered with older brothers, and they're the hardest ones to reach. They're the hardest ones to help to see the gospel, because they don't see that they need the gospel, right? Because of, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is my resume, God's lucky. They don't ever say it like this, but this is what they mean. God's lucky to have me on their team.
It feels that way. It does. It feels that way. That I immediately thought of when I was a youth pastor in Jackson, Tennessee, a while ago, probably at least 2 years ago now.
At least
2 years.
You didn't have hair then either, did you?
I did
There's
for a little
pictures.
bit. I
There's
did for a
pictures.
little bit. We started reaching skateboarders like crazy because that was my thing. I was a skateboarder, and we baptized a lot of skater kids. And when they came in the church, they brought in all their baggage with them. I mean, I remember one old lady in the hallway at one point starts sniffing and smelling, and she's like, "I smell something. Is that cigarette smoke?" And I went, "Yeah, that's cigarette smoke."
Flavored skunk cigarette smoke.
Yeah, exactly. They brought pot in the church. They brought weed. They would wear shirts that were incredibly offensive. And I kind of watched this whole syndrome. There were some in the church that would celebrate and be like, "Hey, we're gonna take them right where they are, and we're gonna embrace them because they are here." And I saw others, Wally, to your point, that immediately go to behavior of like, well, they're not like this. They're not dressed like this. They're not doing like, they're not doing what they're supposed to. And they resented the fact that all of a sudden the first 3 rows were filled with Misfits and Sex Pistols and, all these horrible shirts on the first 3 rows. They were offended by that. And that's that older brother piece that you're talking about. And I think it's bounded set, which we talked about before. If you don't believe these things and if you don't behave this way, then you are on the outside looking in.
And I get to say what I always love to say. As the younger brother had the sin of unrighteousness, and I think Keller's copied me on this.
He did.
I had it a long time before he published his stuff. As much as he was lost because of his unrighteousness, the older boy is just as lost because of his self-righteousness. Because it's what I do that warrants me to allow to be seen as my father's son. I'm entitled to that because of what I do. And that's not how anybody approaches Christ. That's not how you approach the God of the universe. We receive the grace and mercy of his love for us through his son Jesus Christ, and that alone makes us his child. By repenting of our jacked up nature, that he chooses to love us even while we're in the midst of our junk, he loved us and sent his son to die for us. I mean, that's the extravagance of grace, right?
It is. And would you agree, though, that in our lives that we're both brothers at different points in our time? In other words, our inclination
Heck yeah.
goes that way. Like we're both the younger brother and the older brother. There are times where we need that restoration and that repentance and, that second and third and 100th chance. And there are other times where our self-righteousness kicks in.
Well, and we need to acknowledge that self-righteousness is as much as a sin as our unrighteousness, and that we need repentance from that. We need to be turning from those things, right? But that's the problem. Self-righteous people don't think they need to be forgiven of anything.
Exactly. Because look at my record.
That's right.
Paul's going to bring this out later after Jesus dies and he gets his little thing on Damascus Road. But he says later, no longer are you going to live by the law of the Torah. You're going to be living by the law of the Spirit. And so we're not following the regulations of the Torah. We're going to follow who God really is. And if you sit with that and you follow that, then that is what he's calling you to do. Which is not what I learned I learned some of that in church, but when I was growing up in church, that's not what we learned.
You were taught that. You didn't see it modeled for you.
Well, maybe.
Well, I mean, but this speaks to Hebrews and the open way to the throne of grace and mercy and being able to approach it with confidence. So there's this sense of relationship that is open to us where before it was closed. Only the priest could enter the Holy of Holies. And here God is saying, no, come sit with me. Come tell me your problems. Come be with me. And in that, let me know, and I will let you know. So there's an intimacy that is implied where we're no longer a slave, but we can say Abba, Father, which implies a higher level of intimacy that is restored in this story. There's restoration that comes, that the younger son can come back and say, Abba. The older son can say, Abba, with all rights and privileges.
And again, I would argue that the Pharisees knew this, but they weren't living it. Sometimes, again, we think of the Pharisees as this would have been new information. No, they understood that it was about a relationship. They understood the idea of God as Abba. They just weren't living it. And, you talked about this in our churches today. People know this cognitively. They know this. They know this story. They could recite it to you. They know this in their head, but it doesn't mean that they're living it out, right? They're living out more transactionally.
Well, go ahead, John.
No.
I was going to say, whenever you teach this parable, and I know what's going on in somebody's mind that's the older brother, they're thinking, I sure hope Steve over there hears this message because they really need it.
Well, I was thinking Jonathan, but yeah.
I was using somebody that wasn't.
That's what he was trying to say.
Because they really need it. I don't.
Which is the whole point.
Well,
we're supposed to see it in ourselves.
So I've done a few small groups, but I got into this thing a couple years ago about the doing always proper doing always follows proper being. That if you're not being first, then you can't properly do, because the actions come out of the heart, out of the spirit, and to go back to my dad, eventually you'll watch him break down this little crappy lawnmower motor so many times and taking the carburetor and trying to clean it. You're like the 100th time, Dad, can I just do that? Not because he said this is what you do first. You just watched it so many times. It's like, I already know how to do this. Or in yoga, I'm doing this little flow, or 3 or 4 of them. I don't really know. First day it was like pathetic. But now I'm like, I already know what's next. You can go ahead and tell me, but I already know what's next. Because the doing, the pattern, I've already learned because I've sat and I've listened and I've watched, not for the sake of listening and watching and slaving, but just because I want to be around it, because I'm attracted to that. And I think if we would do that more and take the junk out of our eyes of what the things we're doing and the silliness sometimes that we think we're doing for Jesus, which it's not, then I think that would be more like the cross between the older and the younger son. Anyway.
So the moral of the story is you too can become a professional yoga person. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh my gosh.
I just like that he uses the term flow. So
Flow, yes.
Get you on the yoga mat, brother.
I don't think so.
I will get you on the yoga mat and I will break you.
I don't do yoga.
Yeah, you don't do yoga. You be yoga. You practice yoga. You don't do yoga.
Up to those things.
You practice and you be. You don't do.
That's
you
the
missed
line.
the whole point.
I open myself up to those evil spirits in that yoga room. There's our clip there.
Please send the responses to Jonathan.
I'll take him. I'll get you in the yoga room and I will stretch you till you're broken.
Well, I hope this has been helpful. I know we have really gone deep into this parable, and some of you may be like, okay, well, where did you come down? Like, what is the meaning?
We didn't.
Yeah, and that's the point. By the way, in this parable, there is not a nice and neat ending, and I think that was also intentional. Jesus is like, the ending, it's up to you. What is your choice going to be? And our discussion here, our hope is that it provokes you to learn more and to dig into Scripture more and allow it to change your heart. So hope this has been beneficial. Thank you, guys. We will see you next week with another parable.